Mr. Schoeller is on his way. He ran into some traffic, so he'll be right here. My name is Madison. I'm the Chief Deputy of the County Clerk's Office, and if you didn't know, we just finished a presidential election, and so we were asked to give kind of a presentation on what it looked like, and then just kind of some interesting data points and what things are moving forward. So first of all, good morning. Happy Tuesday. I've had maybe one sip of coffee, but don't worry, we're going to make it through. All right. So here's our agenda today. We're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to talk about the election prep, what it kind of looks like in a really bird's eye overview. I know Chelsea and I have given that presentation before, a little bit more in depth, but kind of how it pertained to the November election. A couple of things that we did new this election, and then talking numbers and moving forward. So I'll do the first part. That way you can catch your breath. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So in election prep, it does take us 10 weeks prior to every election to prepare for an election. We had 4 elections this year. So that's 40 weeks of pure election prep. One was a little bit smaller because it was condensed and court ordered. Presidential election, we honestly started prepping for this about a year and a half ago, working with different agencies and how we could think outside the box and bringing some new innovative ways here in Greene County to make our election a little more secure, a little more transparent, and just giving everybody that smooth election day. So this is what it kind of looks like, the roadmap. We had 30 ballot styles for Greene County itself, and that's just because of all the different commission districts. We had the city go on, all of our legislative districts. We have 130 through 137 here. That is actually a really small number for ballots. In April, we have a little bit more than that. And then in August, we can have close to 80-ish, just because of the primary and the partisan part of it. Equipment testing, that happens about 5 to 3 weeks prior. The public test is 3 weeks, but we start internally testing it to make sure the public test goes well about 5 weeks prior to. We tested 300 pull pads, 106 DS200s, and 122 express votes. And you're probably asking, what the heck are each one of those? The pull pad is an iPad-based electronic check-in system that we use here in Greene County. Think of it as that paper roster that the election judge would flip to find your name and sign in on it. We don't do that anymore. We do have backup paper, but we have iPad-based where all it is a quick scan and electronic signature. And there's 300 of those. We have 106 DS200s in the field. That is our ballot tabulator. So what that is the giant calculator. It actually takes a picture of your ballot front and back. It is not connected to the internet, and it is tested prior to every election and after every election. And we test that with bipartisan teams, and every single ballot style gets fed through. We create a test deck. So if we want to get really nerdy, we create 1 to max test decks. So if candidate number 1 is in position 1, there's 1 ballot in that test deck. Candidate number 2 in position number 2, there's 2 ballots in that test deck for that candidate, all the way down to make sure it's tabulating correctly before and after the election. And then an express vote is our ballot marking device. It is a giant pencil. It's a 19-pound ADA compliant ballot marking device. Think of it as a TSA kiosk. So maybe you're not able to fill in the oval with use of hands, or you can't see the font, or you just want to do the electronic ballot marking device. It does print out a paper ballot, right? But those are tested before the election, again, that 5 weeks, and then 3 weeks prior publicly. We pack supplies. These are just some fun numbers of how many of each of our larger items that we packed. So we packed 8,600 voter registration applications, and then 17,200 pens. And yes, they do like to walk off. Those are probably our most favorite thing. We started doing amounts of large quantities of pens in 2020 with COVID-19, and we've continued that on just because our voters like that experience, and it actually gives us better quantity control and not having to actually go out and buy pens on election day, because I do remember those days. So, and then we start training election judges. We actually had 31 training sessions this fall. We do an annual training, so we are really heavy in training at the beginning of the year. So February and March, we have a little bit more training sessions because by the time we get to October, hopefully our election judges have already experienced an election or two with us, and they've already taken that annual training. But prior to every election, we do require an overview training that they go over the laws because those laws, while they don't change, they are situational. So like in April, we won't have what's called a federal provisional ballot, but we will in August and November. But in 2025, we will not have that federal provisional ballot again. So it's only for what's considered a federal election, right? Election day, I kind of give you a snapshot of what Shane and my day looked like. So it was 4:45 a.m. here at the OEM, and then we were here till 2 a.m. So I know there were a couple other people that hung out with us on that night, and thank you to them because it was a long night. It was a smooth night, but a long night. We had a security upgrade on our equipment to better provide us data quickly. So in previous equipment, you could actually pull the results over without the ballot images in 2 different transactions. It would make election night faster. With the security upgrade in our equipment, we're not able to do that anymore. So you have to pull the images at the same time that you pull the results. And what that means is if you want to think about it, one of our tabulators had 16,000 ballots on it for absentee. So you can imagine how long that took for that to pull over. And then finally, post-testing, we get to do all of that equipment testing again, especially after that long election day. And then the Wednesday after election day, we bring in all of our delivery pieces back. So the highway department, we work with them and they actually go help us pick up all of our equipment, bring it back to the warehouse, and then we start organizing. We also have to start post-testing and getting ready for certification. So this is completely a team effort. As I've mentioned, the highway department already. We also worked with the OEM. Overtime, so I only calculated what was paid out overtime. That kind of shows you what our team put in just for the November election. That doesn't include any, obviously, exempt employees there, or our hourly election judges, which is in the next snapshot. We had 800 election judges, express vote operators, election night workers, and hourly election judges this election. So we are still working on payrolls for those team members. It just takes a lot. We can't run a payroll at the same time that we're running county payroll, so every single week is basically a payroll week for us until the end of the year. And then finally, our clerk team. I want to say a huge shout out. There's a couple members here, and I know there's some down in the office right now still working on election stuff so we can get our voter registration history posted. But there's 18 team members, and there's only 2 dedicated to elections in our office. But in a presidential election, everybody becomes an elections team member, and it's just, what can I do? Everybody rolls up their sleeves, and you'll see anyone sweeping the floor to packing ballots to lifting heavy boxes, just having a good time with a smile on their face. We may have some music in the warehouse, but it's always been a team effort, and I always appreciate our team here. We also, in presidential elections, we started this in 2020. We started a call center working with the operations center at the OEM. We actually brought back a retired employee that thought they may have been retired, but they came back and helped us out supervising that call center. And then we had 5 temporary employees helping bring the call load off for incoming voter registration phone calls. All right, new this election. Shane, do you want to talk about what we did something new?
Morning, all. Apologize. Had a couple unexpected delays, and if there was a car to be in front of me this morning, it was in front of me. So, with the traffic light to go with it. So, anyway, of course, every election it seems like you have something that's new, and so that's always challenge for both of us in terms of making sure we encompass all of that. And so, one of the best changes we had, though, that really kind of follows up on work we began in 2016, which in 2016, we began work with the sheriff's office. And reasons we did that is, do you remember when they were making some threats in terms of like election workers and even some of the political offices, campaign offices were having some threats, and even I think there was some violence that was done at those places. So I had some election judges who were very concerned at that time in terms of their personal safety. So that's when the sheriff's office began to work with us, and they actually worked the day of the election as election workers. They're actually working the express vote, which Madison mentioned. So they're in a nonpartisan role, and they're there to essentially assist voters. But if someone does begin to create a problem, they're there to assist quickly. And so they're not at every location, but they're at a number of locations during the day of the election. And that makes a big difference in terms of our election judges, just in terms of their sense of personal safety. But then we've branched out and had worked with the Springfield Police Department. But then this last year, Larry Woods reached out to us because unfortunately, you continue to hear in a lot of the headlines, there's a lot of unfortunate threats that are continually being made towards election workers. Now, here in Missouri, I'm not aware of anyone that has had a personal threat in terms of their life, but it has happened in other election jurisdictions across the country. And so, I don't know if you watched any of the news media leading up to the election, but a number of election offices, especially in the swing states, like Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, they took tremendous security measures in terms of even their election offices, because even after the election, there were people that were showing up with automatic weapons and walking around the election offices after the election in 2020. And so there was a sense that we need to be more cautious and more thoughtful about security. Now, again, we have not had that happen here in Springfield, not had in Greene County. I'm not aware of that happening here in our state. But again, as I always tell our team, it only takes one, right? And then that one person, unfortunately, makes it a lot more difficult for everyone else. So working with Larry, they really have, as you well know, the network within their operation to be able to coordinate with all of the agencies, not just the law enforcement, but fire protection in terms of our fire departments across the county, even utilities. We had some utilities working with us for both August and November. And what that really does is it helps us be able to be prepared when something happens. For example, back in August, there was city utility work being done right in front of one of our polling locations. We had a CU person there. Within 15 minutes, the call was made. The work was shut down. There was no issue for folks being able to access that polling location. So it's really made a tremendous difference in terms of the working together and coordinating for Election Day. For our election judges, of course, as you can see, on Election Day, up in North Greene County, we had a polling location did not have power that morning. You may remember there was some storms the night before. And then there was a water main break at fire station number 8. And so they were without water the entire day. And so we were able to work with CU. They were able to get them porta potties that were brought in so they would be able to use the restroom throughout the day as well as the voters. And then we were also able to get them some bottled water so they could have some water throughout the day. So that was working with the EOC. Then line management, I don't know if you all noticed, if you're here on campus of Greene County, we had a lot of folks hanging out at the election center about 6 weeks, especially 2 weeks from the election. Anybody recall those lines? So, and that was because the legislature made a change back in 2022. It said 2 weeks out from the election, you don't have to give a reason. You can come as long as you've got your ID with you and you're an eligible voter, you can vote prior to the election. So we did that both at the election center and then at the library center there on South Campbell. And I will tell you that we thought there would be, a good response to it, but we did not anticipate the numbers that came at both, especially at the library center. I mean, from the day one, we had just tremendous lines. And so you can see, for example, at the library center, first day was 881 voters. And I know our folks there felt like they could barely catch their breath. Of course, we made some changes, some additions there. And then you go back to the 4th, the day before the election, they almost doubled that to 1,508 voters. And so, matter of fact, on the Saturday before the election, there were so many people there, they were actually parking in the Academy parking lot, in the grass between the library and the Academy parking. And the line, I have pictures of it on my phone, I should have sent to Madison, but the line was wrapped all the way back and around to the south side of the library and then came back and wrapped all the way around back up to the Academy Sports. And I kept telling voters, probably election day will be a little less of a line, but, but they were excited about that. So we were working and coordinating. We worked with the Sheriff's Department in terms of just making sure everyone had a good experience, a safe experience. So we've got some lessons learned from that I'll talk about here in a little bit. Then ballot on demand. One of the things that we had the opportunity to do was work with No Ink. They worked with us in terms of the check-in equipment that Madison mentioned. You can now actually coordinate with them to print ballots on demand. And so we decided to do that. Was it late last year, early this year that we purchased those? I think we began the discussion late last year. Move forward early this year in the actual purchase. That absolutely saved us because, as you can see, we ordered 20,000 ballots. You'll see the number here coming up. We have many more than that vote. Fortunately, because we could print those ballots on demand at each location, it really made a big difference. And so there was very little wait time if we did run low on a ballot in terms of getting those printed at each polling location. So let's talk the numbers. This is the fun stuff. So, in terms of actual total number of voters voted, we had 145,848 voters vote. That's the most in actual terms of actual numbers of voters who voted in any one election in Greene County. Average wait time during no excuse, as you can see, could be 45 minutes. During the day of the election, it was 15 minutes. Again, we've got 80 polling locations. It's spread out. People go to the assigned polling locations. They go to central polling locations. They had a much, now there were a few handful of locations that was longer, and that was usually because we had a tremendous response to curbside voting. And so that always delays when we have curbside voting. Not that it's a problem, it just makes the wait time longer. Before the election, 39,148 voters voted. That's the most we've had in any election as well. Now, that includes mail as well, but the predominant amount of that was people coming to vote 2 weeks before the election. So, in the courthouse, I'm sure everyone appreciated seeing all of our friends who came to vote. We had 8,517 that voted for 6 weeks out. Now, again, most of those came 2 weeks out. And then to the election center, 16,111. And then down at the library center, and again, they're 9 to 4. So take that into, thinking about the calculation of how many voters they voted in that 2-week period. But in 2 weeks, they had 14,466 voters that voted. So, now, the other thing, there was a change in state law that said if you move from another county, you're registered, you can actually vote on the day of the election. And so now people can do that. We had 639 people do that on the day of the election. And that was another unexpected challenge that we're going to work with going forward. Had 225,250 ballots ordered. The length of the ballot was 17 inches. The cost of the ballot was 25 cents. You can do the calculation on that. It's expensive very quickly. And the length of the ballot really caused problems in terms of voters being able to put that in and be able to guide it through as it was being scanned. It caused some challenges on election day. I'm trying to move along because I think we only got a couple minutes. Is that right? Or we got another 10? Okay, good. For some reason I had 8:32 in my mind. So, but you probably heard some of the machines jammed on the day of the election. And for a 17-inch length ballot front and back, what we had was some people would just put it in just enough cockeyed that when it would scan it through, it would jam. We also had somebody who decided to fold their ballot. That was nice. Doesn't work though. That jammed the machine as well. I think we had a little bit of one that got coffee on it or something that ended up causing problems. So they were voting with their coffee. I think they may have had a child with them too. So anyone can understand that when they've been a parent and had a child with them. So let's look at the cost numbers. So back in 2012, we total election cost was $335,213.87. That's when the county actually encumbered all the cost. Same thing in 2016, the county encumbered all the cost, $345,651.98. In 2020, we were supposed to share the cost with the state, but because of COVID, they removed that shared cost that they were going to do with each of the counties across the state. And so the cost went up then, as you can imagine. COVID costs were significant, $393,173.61. And we had additional almost $60,000 from grant funding that is not in that total. But if you put that together, we spent almost $460,000 during the 2020 election. So now you look at the total for 2024, and you're like, how did it jump that much? Number one, I just mentioned you the ballots. Number two, it's the labor cost. We had significant labor cost That came because of the no excuse absentee voting. And so we had 2 weeks of open polling for voters, and we had to be able to meet that need. And so moving forward, we're going to look at that, see how we can manage that cost. But again, that was one of those unexpected challenges that we had. Now, here's the good thing, though. City of Springfield had an issue on the ballot, and then the state of Missouri is paid its fair share, and then the county pays its share. So we will not encumber all the costs of that 661,182. It will be, I don't know, probably somewhere around the 300,000 range that we'll cover, somewhere in that range, maybe less, give or take. Depends upon.
It's like a third.
Yeah, so it's about a third. But that's where the proportional sharing comes. So that's the good news is now that we share the cost, we're not, bearing the load of all those costs like we would have back in 2012 and 2016 and 2020. So moving forward, yeah, just
real quick, if you have just one issue on the ballot, like, city did, or you have multiple, do they just pay their share of, or is it based on how many items are on the ballot?
no, it is proportional. So the formula says, and it's based upon the number of voters you have. That is included in the formula. Now, I'm not going to try to explain the formula to you here because it is not easily explained. But at the end of the day, for example, if Republican had an issue on the ballot, they would have had a proportional share, but much less because of the number of voters that they have. If that makes sense. Anything to add to that?
It's not like a legal notice, like, right, they measure how much space you have on the ballot and then that was your cost. It is literally, if you have one issue, you have the same amount due based off of how many voters that you have. So, looking back at like an April election when City Republic had like 10 questions on the ballot, plus a couple of contests, their bill was the same for what it would be for just a special election, essentially, if they had one issue on the ballot, because it's based off the people that live in that district.
So, anyway, good question. So, now I know some of you are probably at the election night watch parties and you're like waiting, just excited to get those results. Matter of fact, I think a text and phone call from Brent. What's going on here? Anyway, he was the man of the hour. What happened was, remember I mentioned 17-inch length ballot issues front and back, and so we digitally scan every image that comes in. And so that's just another backup measure. If something happens to the paper copy, we got the digital image. And so when we went to upload all of those images with the results from the election day in terms of the uncertified results, it took a significant amount of time, especially for our absentee locations. Some of them took almost 45 minutes to an hour just for one USB stick to upload those results in order to be able to report them out that night. So you begin to take that and you have 80 polling locations, you can begin to see it took a lot longer time than we anticipated to be able to get the results out. So one of the things we're looking at is we're actually going to look at purchasing two and have its own dedicated server / router so that we can do that a lot more quickly for the bigger elections, because no matter how many times you try to explain these things to the public, most of the people are not going to have that information. They're not going to understand. And so that's why we think it makes sense in order to be able to upload two at the same time, have a faster upload time. Because of that, we can get those results out quicker and hopefully put people's fears to the side, because a lot of times when election results don't come out quickly, as I told my election judges, usually it ends up it's the one race where it's tight that you're waiting to get the final results from. And so we don't want to add any unnecessary fear or just anxiety to those candidates and the people, their supporters, as they're waiting to get those results in. So we've already moved forward on making that purchase. And then additional locations, we'll look at Republic and North Springfield potentially as two additional locations to help hopefully be able to distribute the voters who are coming a little bit more equitably versus all coming here to the campus. I mean, we even had a number of people from Willard that were going to the Library Center, even people from North Springfield going to the Library Center. So we had a lot of people that were going even to the south side to vote. Chain of custody, one of the things we're looking at, we've improved that significantly since 2020 in terms of our documentation, but we were looking at maybe technology, using RFID in our equipment to be able to track the equipment once it leaves the election center, goes to the polling location, to when it comes back, so that we can keep an eye on that 24/7. That's, of course, an important issue. And then we'll continue to work with OEM in terms of everything that they do and the services that they provide. As you know, they're constantly looking for ways to improve. And so we'll take a look at that and see what we can do even better coming up in 2026 and 2025 for April. So Sam Watterson said, and I don't know who this man was, but anyways, do what now? Great quote. If you're not moving forward, you're falling back. And so we try to keep that in mind in terms of election. So I try to move forward. So what questions do you have for us this morning? Just
On that upload issue that you're
Yeah.
having, you're trying to upload the images of the ballots, but then there's also a digital count. Is there any way to isolate and separate those to where you're just getting the digital count? You can mess with the images later?
the software does not provide that currently, and I don't
It
know.
used to, but then with the security update, we're not able to anymore. It's all one package that comes in.
Yes.
When the legislature mandated the change to the 2 weeks previous.
Yes.
They also mandate any money specifically for our costs going forward?
Other than the shared cost, that would be the only way that they help.
So you said it was unexpected that that your cost grew so much, so would that behoove us to go back to them and say, hey, this is what happened, we need some help here?
I mean, we'll certainly make that case in terms of continuing shared cost, but I don't think we'll get very far. Just to be to the point, it's
And also election costs. So we provide an estimate, that 661 number that you guys saw there. We send that proportionally out already to the city, the state, and the county, and each one of those entities paid their estimate. And then what I've been working on right now, all the way till the end of the year, and hopefully finish by December 31st, if all the payrolls finish out, we will be able to say, okay, these were the actual costs. And then basically we bill for whatever overage there was, or we give them a refund for the remaining balance. So
Did we hear from any of the other larger counties that they have similar issues with just?
yes,
everywhere.
yes, Missouri
Everywhere.
was, yes,
It was.
it was an issue for the state. I mean, in comparison, Kansas City wait times were about 3 to 4 hours in some of their locations.
And I would equate it to basically you took election day and you had it for 2 weeks at these locations. So, but again, good challenge to have. We want people participating. One of the things you have when you have everyone voted on one day is people that cannot stand in line for long periods of time. They will end up just going home. And so the goal is when you're having people vote prior to it is to be able to help make sure the lines on election day are manageable. It also helps us because, for example, she mentioned voter registration. 2016, we had over 8,000 addresses changes on the day of the election. We're probably going to have a similar amount to that for this election. So the less people you have on election day, the better we can facilitate the issues when they arise. Because that's really what we're trying to do is facilitate all the challenges that come up when you have really your greatest amount of voters are going to come because it's the election we participate in. A lot of them haven't necessarily updated the voter registration information. Or, for example, maybe they haven't voted for 2 presidential elections and they moved, and then they find out by law we had to remove them from voter registration roster. That can become an intense situation in a polling location. We'd rather have a lot of those things facilitated prior to the day of the election so that voters have a good experience. So it does help, even though it causes some challenges. Who else? Madison's only giving you one more question. Exactly. Yes, Justin.
So on the places where you're voting for 2 weeks, the chain of custody on that machine where people are feeding their ballots.
Right.
At that, like Solicitor Library.
Mm-hmm.
They locking it up and then every night they get it back out and they boot up the machine as if it's just a continuation of the same day. It's not like each day is archived as its own polling place.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was one of the fun challenges we had was we actually had at the election center the actual stick, which had 8 gigabytes. Is that right?
I think, yes.
8 gig.
Yes, we have a little bit larger.
Maxed out on us one day. And so lesson learned, We'll now know is when we get towards that kind of number of ballots that were cast in the machine for this election, we'll know to have another one ready for the bigger elections so that people, because we did have about a 45-minute period where they had to cast the ballot into the metal bin. That created some consternation, as you can imagine. The media was made aware of it, and we had nothing to hide. But some people don't understand what's taking place, and so those type of things that we can learn from moving forward, so that voters have a smooth experience, whether they're here or whether they're at the polling location on the day of the election. So anyway, well, hopefully this has been informative. Thank Madison for jumping in there early. Of course, she probably knows it as good or as better than I do, so she gave you a great overview at the beginning. But we appreciate everyone here, what you do to help us with each election, because I know it's not just our office. A lot of you allow the people in your office to work election day, so we're grateful for that. And so it makes a big difference. And so anyway, Christian, I know you were at the Office of Emergency Management. You had an incredible morning experience to start that day. And so anyway, too bad we don't have time to tell that story this morning. Election days, I will tell you this, they are an adventure. And you feel like from the moment you start from 5 in the morning, you're just trying to ride that all the way through the day and not get bucked off that horse before it's over. So anyway, but thank you all. Have a great day. Appreciate it.